State College, Pennsylvania, a rally with presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders just getting underway. There you see the senator. Our Road to the White House coverage continuing here on C-SPAN. Quick reminder, 9 o'clock Eastern tonight, our New York primary coverage starts right here on C-SPAN.
Thank you. It looks like Penn State is ready for a political revolution. What a great turnout, and thank you all very much for being here. And let me thank Jacob Michael Ryan, Lauren Smith, and Sophia McLennan. Thank you so much for that introduction. Now, I don't want you to tell anybody this, so keep it. But Secretary Clinton is getting a little bit nervous. And she's getting nervous because we have won 7 out of the last 8 caucuses and primaries. She's getting nervous because when we began this campaign, we were 60 points behind, and in the last couple of weeks, a few national polls have actually had us in the lead. And she's getting nervous because Democratic voters know that in virtually every national matchup general election poll, we beat Donald Trump by wider numbers than she does. And the American people are catching on that if we are going to prevent Trump or some other Republican from occupying the White House, which would be a disaster for our country, we have got the campaign to make sure that that does not happen. This is the campaign that has the energy, that has the enthusiasm, and that in November will create the kind of voter turnout that will not only allow us to retain the White House, but will regain the U.S. Senate, will do better in the House. Now, as many of you know, there is, as we speak, right this moment, there is a Democratic primary taking place in New York State. Now, the polls don't close there until 9 p.m., so we don't know who is going to be winning or losing. But you know what? We're going to do a lot better, I think, than people thought we would. And I want to thank all of the people in New York for the support that they are giving us today. But I do want to say something. One of the themes of this campaign in Pennsylvania and every state that we have been to is the need to reinvigorate American democracy. Right now in America, we have one of the lowest voter turnout rates of any major country on earth. And I want us to change that. I want to see more of our people actively involved in the political process, regardless of their views. And in that regard, I would hope that in future primary elections in New York State, the officials there make some fundamental changes about how they do business. Today in New York State, if you can believe this, in New York State today, about 27% of the eligible voters in that state are unable to participate in the Democratic or Republican primaries because they have chosen to list themselves as independents. That's wrong. Almost 3 million people in that state cannot vote today, and that has got to change in future elections. It is absurd that in Brooklyn, New York, where I was born actually, tens of thousands of people, as I understand it, have been purged from the voting rolls. It's a little bit crazy that in upstate New York, they opened the polls at 12 noon. What happens to people who get up early in the morning and have to go to work? And yet, despite all of that, despite the fact that Secretary Clinton has won elections there twice for the U.S. Senate, despite the fact that she beat then-Senator Obama in 2008 in the primary there by 17 points, despite the fact that virtually the entire New York political Democratic establishment is standing with her, you know what? We're going to do just fine tonight in New York. And the reason that we're going to do as well as we will is because we're doing something pretty radical in contemporary American politics. We are telling the truth. And the truth is, and people understand it, whether you're conservative, progressive, or moderate, is we have a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. Democracy is not a complicated process. It is one person, one vote, not billionaires and their super PACs buying elections. And when I talk about revitalizing American democracy, what it means is that if any of you are interested in running for office, no matter what your view may be, I want you to be able to stand up, fight for your points of view, and run for office without having to beg wealthy people for campaign contributions. I am very proud. You know, when we talk about a political revolution and transforming America, we are already accomplishing that in terms of the way that our campaign is raising money. We are virtually the only campaign that does not have a super PAC. We made a decision early on that our campaign does not represent the billionaire class. We don't represent corporate America. We don't represent Wall Street. And we have chosen not to take their money. Instead, what we have done is something unprecedented in the history of this country. What we have done is reach out to the middle class and working families. And what we have said is, look, if you want a candidate who is prepared to stand up to the 1% who have so much impact over our economy and our political life, support us. We need your help. And unbelievably, and in a million years, I never would have predicted that this could happen. In the last 11-plus months, we have received some 7 million individual campaign contributions. That is more campaign contributions than any candidate in the history of our country at this point in an election. And what we have shown uniquely is that we can run a winning national campaign without being dependent on the big money interests. Anyone here know what the average campaign contribution is? That's right. It's absolutely right. $27. That's pretty good. Now, Secretary Clinton has chosen another approach. She has a number of super PACs. And in the last filing report, her major super PAC listed $25 million in special interest funding, including $15 million from Wall Street. Now, in addition to that, as some of you may know, Secretary Clinton has given speeches behind closed doors to Wall Street firms for $225,000 a speech. Now, what I have said is if you're going to get paid $225,000 for a speech, must be a pretty good speech. Must be an earth-shattering speech. Must be a speech which sheds brand new light on the global crises that we face. Must be a speech written in Shakespearean prose. I mean, I can't imagine anyone getting $2.25 for a speech if it's not that great. So I think if that speech is as great as it must be a good idea for the Secretary to release the transcript of that speech to all of us. Now, Secretary Clinton has said, well, she will release those transcripts if other people do the same. All right, are you ready? Are you ready for a dramatic announcement? All right, this is an historical moment, so pay rapt attention. Tonight, I am announcing that I will release all of the transcripts of all of the speeches I have given to Wall Street. And because I believe in transparency on this matter, I am going to make all of those transcripts available to you right now. Are you ready? All right, here they come. We got them? That's it. No speeches, no transcripts, not for $225,000, not for $2. But I am keeping my cell phone on because I am waiting for that call from JP Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs saying, Bernie, we want you to give a speech to Wall Street. Now, I don't need $200,000, I don't need $2, but I would like to speak to Wall Street, and I will tell you why. Because it is important for somebody to tell Wall Street that their greed, their recklessness, and their illegal behavior seriously hurt the lives of millions of our fellow Americans. As a result of their actions, their illegal actions, millions of Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings, and many of those people have yet to recover. Now, the other point that I would like to make to Wall Street is when Congress, against my vote, bailed them out, when Congress bailed them out because the major banks were too big to fail, turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks today are bigger now than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. Turns out that 5 major banks could not recently pass what's called a living will process, telling us how they would break themselves up in the event of a financial crisis for those banks. Turns out also that in the last week or two, Goldman Sachs, one of the large financial institutions on Wall Street, reached a $5 billion settlement with the United States government. You know why they reached that settlement? Because they acknowledged that they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans. And they, of course, were not the only bank. Other major banks reached even larger settlements. So point number one, I want you to think about this as we think outside of the box. Wall Street is the most powerful entity in the United States of America. They have more economic and political power than any other entity in our country. And yet it turns out that the business model for the major financial institutions is fraud. And that is why when 3 out of 4 are larger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail, today we have got to break them up. And here is another point that gets the American people very cynical and very angry. Some kid in Pennsylvania today gets picked up for possessing marijuana. That kid will have a criminal record for his entire life. But turns out that if you are an executive for a major Wall Street firm whose illegal behavior destroys the lives of millions of Americans, the only thing you get is an increase in your compensation package. And that is why together we are going to bring justice back to a broken criminal justice system. Now, I don't know, but maybe that's why they have not invited me to give that speech to Wall Street. Could be wrong. This campaign is doing as well as it is because we understand that not only do we have a corrupt campaign finance system, we have a rigged economy. And let me tell you what you're not going to see on television very often or read in the papers. And that is, in America today, we have more income and wealth inequality than almost any major country on earth, and it is worse today than at any time since 1928. Now, I want you to think about it, because this campaign is about thinking outside of the box. It is about not accepting the status quo because it is the status quo. It is about challenging the status quo. What this campaign is about is saying loudly and clearly that when the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%, that is not an economy that is moral, sustainable, or American. America should not be a nation in which the 20 wealthiest people, 20 people, have more wealth than the bottom 50% of our people, 150 million Americans. And let me explain what a rigged economy is about, because it's not just grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality. Today, the wealthiest family in America is the Walton family, who owns Walmart. Now, you're not going to see this on TV, but the fact is that Walmart is the largest private sector employer in this country, and the wages they pay their workers are so low that many of their employees are forced to go on food stamps or Medicaid. Who pays for those food stamps and Medicaid for Walmart employees? You do. That's what a rigged economy is about. You are subsidizing the wealthiest family in America. That is absurd. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, start paying your employees a living wage. And when we talk about the economy, it is not just a very unfortunate and grotesque distribution of wealth. It has everything to do with income. Now, for the young people here, let me tell you something. You probably won't believe it, but Google it after you leave. Not now. Wait a few minutes. Check this one out. 40 years ago, before all of the technology and all of the robotics and all of the cell phones and all of the global economy, guess what? 40 years ago, one person in a family, in those days, most often a man, could work 40 hours a week and bring in enough income to take care of the whole family. Now, I know you don't believe me, but it's true. Today, after an explosion of worker productivity, an explosion of technology, in almost all families, mom is working, dad's working, and the kids are working, and they have less disposable income than the one earner did 40 years ago. And in fact, let me give you some news that together we are going to have to address. All right, young people, you ready for this? All right, buckle up, because we're going to change it. But if we don't transform this economy, the young generation of today, for the first time in the modern history of America, will have a lower standard of living than your parents. In other words, unless we turn around this economy, which together we will, we are looking at the end of the American dream, and we will not allow that to happen. My family never had any money, but my father worked hard, my mom worked hard, and the expectation was that their children would do better than they. And that is what the American dream has been around for tens of millions of American families. But right now, unless we transform our economy, your generation will not do better than your parents, and that is why we will transform this economy. But it is not just the corrupt campaign finance system we have to deal with. It is not just a rigged economy. It is a broken criminal justice system. I hope all of you know that in America today, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. 2.2 million people in jail. We're spending $80 billion a year locking them up. And that is why we need real reform in our criminal justice system. Today, youth unemployment is off the charts. African American youth unemployment for high school graduates is 51%. For Latinos, 36%. For white kids, 33%. Our job is to make certain that for our young people, we're going to invest in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, we are talking about reforming local police departments all over this country. I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years. I worked with the police there, and I've worked with the police all over this country. Vast majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, and have a very difficult job to do. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We need to demilitarize local police departments. They should not be looking like occupying armies. We need to make police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We need to make certain that every police officer in this country understands that lethal force is the last response, not the first response. We need to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. In the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records as a result of possession of marijuana. And many lives have been destroyed as a result, and this becomes a racial issue because it turns out that the black community and the white community do marijuana at about equal rates, but blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested. Today, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug, right alongside heroin. And that is why I believe we must take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Now, in my state of Vermont and all across this country today, we face a very serious crisis in terms of opiate addiction and heroin addiction, and every single day people are dying of drug overdoses. In my view, if we are going to be successful in addressing this issue, we need to understand that substance abuse and addiction is a health issue, not a criminal issue. And that means a revolution in the way we do mental health treatment in this country. And what that means is we have got to make mental health treatment available to people when they need it, not 6 months from now. Now, this campaign is going to win because we are listening to ordinary Americans, not just wealthy campaign contributors. And what working people are telling me from one end of this country to the other is they can't make it on $8 or $9 an hour. We need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And that living wage is $15 an hour. It is not a radical idea to suggest that if you work 40 hours a week in this country, you should not live in poverty. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, not by how many nuclear weapons it has, but by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. And right now, in Pennsylvania, and in Vermont, and across this country, we have millions of seniors, disabled veterans, and people with disabilities who are struggling to get by on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? You can't get by on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. Now, Republicans, their response to this crisis in many respects is to say, okay, let's cut Social Security. Well, I got some bad news for my Republican colleagues. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security benefits. This campaign is listening to women. And women are telling me they are sick and tired of going to work and finding out they're making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. The women of this country want the whole damn dollar, and they're right. And I know that every man in this arena will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. This campaign is listening to young people. You know, when we began this campaign, the kind of punditry analysis was, well, young people, you know, they're not interested in government, they're not interested in politics, they're too busy with their video games or whatever else they do. Well, turns out not to be quite accurate. Turns out that young people fully understand they are the future of our country, and they want to help determine the future of this country. And wherever I go, young people ask me, they say, listen, our parents told us, go out and get a good education. Our teacher said, get all the education that you can. The whole community said, we are living in a competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. Go out and get that education. But then young people come up to me and they say, we did what people told us to do. Now we are $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt. And the question is, why are we punishing millions of young people for doing exactly what we asked them to do? We should be rewarding people for getting an education, not punishing them. Now just think outside of the box for a moment. Think outside of the status quo. Go beyond where media wants you to go and what our options are. You all know that if this country is to succeed in the future with a strong economy, we all need to have the best education possible. Is that right? Education is inherent in who we are as human beings. We should be educating ourselves to the day we die. It is literally insane to be punishing millions of people, to saying to them, you're going to be paying off your student debt for decades because you got an education. Woman in my own state of Vermont, her dream was to go to medical school. She did. $300,000 in debt. We desperately need more dentists in this country. Woman, Iowa graduates dental school, $400,000 in debt. Talk to a guy in Nevada, 55 years of age. He's been paying off his student debt for 25 years. He's more in debt today than he was when he took out the damn debt. That is not only unfair to the individuals, it is absurd when we talk about the future of our economy. And that is why I believe when we talk about public education today, it is not good enough to just talk about free public education, meaning first grade through 12th grade. The world has changed. The economy has changed. People need more education now than they did 30, 50 years ago. And that is why when we think about public education today, we have got to be thinking about making public colleges and universities tuition free. And with millions of people being crushed by high levels of student debt, we have got to reduce that debt significantly. And we do that by allowing people with the debt to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, very often in this campaign, I'm being criticized for thinking too big. Bernie, you are Santa Claus. You're giving away free tuition. You're going to lower student debt. You're a nice guy. How are you going to pay for all this stuff? All right, I want you to think about a couple of things. Number one, in the last 30 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country from the middle class to the top 0.1%. Trillions of dollars gone from the hands of working families to the very wealthiest people in this country. Second of all, back in 2008, 2009, this country bailed out Wall Street after their illegal behavior helped destroy our economy. I believe that now is the time to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. If we could bail out Wall Street, now it is Wall Street's time to help the middle class. And if we do that, we're going to bring in more than enough money to make public college and universities tuition-free and lower student debt. This campaign is about transforming our national priorities, not accepting the status quo of today. This campaign is listening to the African American community. And they're asking me a very simple but profound question. Bernie, they ask, how does it happen that we have trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into? But somehow we seem not to have enough money to rebuild our crumbling inner cities. And they are absolutely right. I have been to Flint, Michigan. And what I saw in Flint, Michigan was unspeakable, in that children were being poisoned by lead in the water, which is impacting their cognitive capabilities. But it's not just Flint. I was in Detroit, Michigan. Their school system is crumbling as we stand here tonight. All over this country, in inner city America, rents are unaffordable, unemployment rates off the charts, too many people being arrested and sent to jail. We have got to invest in inner cities in this country and rebuild our infrastructure. If we can rebuild the infrastructure in Iraq and Afghanistan, we damn well can rebuild the infrastructure in America. And by the way, when we rebuild our inner cities, when we rebuild our roads and our bridges and our water systems and our wastewater plants and our rail system and our airports, we make America safer, stronger, and we create 13 million decent-paying jobs. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the Latino community. Today, we've got 11 million undocumented people in this country, and many of them are being exploited every day, because when you don't have a legal right, your employer could do anything he wants to you. And that is why, together, we are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. This campaign is listening to a people whose voices are almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. From before this country became a country, when the first settlers came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and treaties negotiated were broken. We as a people owe the Native American community more than we can ever repay. Some of the best aspects of our culture come from the Native American people. They have taught us, among other things, that as human beings, we are part of nature. That we have got to live with nature, not destroy nature. And yet today, despite all they have given us, if you go to reservations in this country or Native American communities, you see terrible, terrible poverty, unemployment, suicide rate among teenagers, horrific. If elected president, we will change our government's relationship to the Native American people. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment, and in that respect, I have met with scientists all over our country, scientists all over the world, and here is the simple truth. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. And it is already doing devastating harm to our country and much of the world. And here is the other truth, a scary truth, but a truth nonetheless. And that is what the scientists are telling us, is that we have a very short window of opportunity to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies. And in my view, we have a moral responsibility to make certain that the planet we leave our kids and future generations is a planet that is healthy and habitable. And what that means politically is that we have got to stand together and take on the fossil fuel industry and tell them that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our planet. And by the way, if we are prepared to think big and think of a clean, sustainable energy system where our homes and our buildings are energy efficient, where our transportation system is energy efficient, where we move aggressively to solar, wind, geothermal, and other sustainable technologies, we can create millions of good-paying green jobs as we make that transformation. Let me repeat now what I have been criticized for saying on many occasions, so let me be crystal clear and say it again. And that is, it is my view that health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. Now, the corporate media doesn't talk about this a whole lot, because they're too busy getting ads from the insurance companies and the drug companies. So let me tell you what you may not see on TV, and that is we are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. They do it in the UK, they do it in France, Germany, Scandinavia, Holland. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They do it in Canada. Now, right now, as a result of the gains of the Affordable Care Act, we have made some progress. We got 17 million Americans who now have health insurance, who previously did not. We've done away with pre-existing conditions. Many young people are now able to be on their parents' insurance plans. All of that is good, but it is not good enough. Today, 29 million people have no health insurance. Even more, including many here tonight, are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. And every person here is getting ripped off by the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for medicine. And despite all of that, we end up spending much more per capita on health care than do the people of any other major country. In my view, and this is thinking outside of the box, but it's envisaging a new America. In my view, we need to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Think of an America where every person has health care as a right. Think of an America where you can quit your job and go out and start your own business and not worry about having health insurance. And if you're a small business person, you don't have to worry about how you're going to provide health insurance to your employees, because they will already have health insurance. Everybody here understands that what American history has been about is the understanding that real change never takes place from the top on down, always from the bottom on up. That is the history of America. Think back, 100+ years ago, workers in this country forced to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, children working in factories, people could be fired arbitrarily, they had no rights on the job. And workers stood up and they said, we are not beasts of burden, we're not animals, we are human beings. We want dignity. We're going to form trade unions and negotiate contracts. Think back several hundred years ago, within the abomination of slavery, African Americans and their allies said, we will struggle for as long as it takes to end racism and segregation and bigotry in the United States of America. And millions of people stood up to fight for an America not based on racism. Think about 100 years ago, not a long time from an historical perspective. 100 years ago today, women did not have the right to vote, could not get the education they wanted, could not do the work they wanted. But women stood up. They stood up and they said, the status quo ain't good enough. It's unacceptable. And women and their male allies said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. And on it goes. That's how change takes place. Think about this. If we were in this room 10 years ago, which is no time at all from an historical perspective, 10 years ago, and somebody here jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, I think that gay marriage will be made legal in this country in 50 states by the year 2015. Do you know what the person next to her would have said? Would have said, you're crazy. You're thinking too big. It can't happen. But what happened is the gay community and their straight allies, they stood up and they made the claim that became impossible to argue against, and that is that people have a right to love each other regardless of their gender. That is how change takes place, always takes place, when people stand up and reject the status quo and come together. Give you one more example. 5 years ago, if we were in this room 5 years ago and somebody jumps up and says, Bernie, you know, this $7.25 an hour minimum wage, it's an outrage, people can't live on it, we got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. Person next to him would have said, $15 an hour? You want to more than double the minimum wage? You're nuts. You're thinking too big. You're too radical. Maybe $8, maybe $10. You can't go to $15 an hour. But you know what happened? Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, they went out on strike. And they said to the American people, we can't make it on $7.25 an hour. And then you know what happened? A couple of years ago in Seattle, Washington, they passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. And then in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oregon, California, New York State. Here is my point. The major crisis we face are not the crises themselves. It is the belief told us every single day by the establishment, by the media, by Congress, you can't make change. This is the status quo, this is the way it is, and this is the way it always will be. Doesn't matter what you believe. And that is what this campaign is challenging. And that is why we're going to win this election. Because change takes place when people look around them and say, whoa, what is going on? This is just not acceptable. And that is what's happening in America today. People all over this country are beginning to see that the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, where almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%, unacceptable. People are beginning to see that it is absurd that we are the only major country on earth not to provide paid family and medical leave. People are asking, how come every other major country on earth can somehow provide health care to all of their people, but we can't do it? Unacceptable. People are asking, how does it happen? Why does it happen that our infrastructure continues to crumble? Why does it happen that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Why do we have a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires to buy election? Why do we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? Why are kids graduating school $30,000, $50,000 in debt? Those are the questions that people are beginning to ask. And as soon as they ask those questions, they quickly realize that establishment politics and establishment economics are not going to solve those problems. I am the only candidate for president to tell you a simple truth, and that is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can solve these crises alone. We need millions of people, including many people who have given up on the political process, who have turned away from the process in disgust. We need them back into the system to reclaim American democracy. We need young people. Many of whom may never have voted yet in their lives to say, excuse me, the decisions you are making now are going to impact me and my kids for the next many, many decades. You better listen to what we have to say. So what this political revolution is about is the understanding is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. The only way we go forward and rebuild America and create the economy that works for all of us, the environment that works for all of us, is when millions of people stand up and say loudly and clearly, enough is enough. And if we do not allow the Donald Trumps of the world to divide us up, if we all understand that our strength is in our diversity, and if we stand together, and if we demand a government that represents all of us and not just the 1%, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Next Tuesday, here in Pennsylvania, there will be an enormously important Democratic primary. What I have learned so far from this campaign is when voter turnout is high, we win. When voter turnout is low, we lose. So next Tuesday, let us have the highest voter turnout in Pennsylvania history. And let Pennsylvania go forward and tell the world you are going to lead this country into a political revolution. Thank you all very much.